Welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole Radio. This is your host, Justin Perry, and this week I am pleased to have my guest, Joshua P. Warren. Joshua is an author of over 20 books, an entrepreneur, and a master manifester. Joshua is an expert in the field of radionics. Radionics is a metaphysical science of local and distant manifestation using intention. So sit back, relax, and listen with an open mind. Okay, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole Radio. I am thrilled to have my wonderful guest, Joshua P. Warren. Thank you so much for coming.
Hey, thank you, Justin. It's a great honor to be with you. I love your work.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. Okay, so Josh, who are you and what do you do?
That's the big question of the age, isn't it?
That's it.
Well, I was born in Asheville, North Carolina, in the mountains there. And I now live in Las Vegas, Nevada. I moved out west a few years ago because I found myself doing a lot of work out here. When I was a teenager growing up in the mountains, I was always infatuated with some of the old legends and folk stories and Native American tales. And so I started writing short stories. And when I was a teenager, I got a book published. I think I was 14 when I started writing it and 15 when it got accepted. And I started working for the local newspaper. And so I was fortunate because once I realized I had this love for research, I wanted to research some of the stranger topics out there. So I started looking into ghosts and UFOs and cryptids and ESP and all that kind of stuff. And I also became a really big gadget guy. I just love playing with technology. And I've always tried to do my best to take a scientific approach to understanding some of these strange things. And so when I was 18, that's when I said, okay, I'm officially self-employed as a researcher, an investigator, a writer. I went to college for mass communication. I also worked as an assistant for years at a NASA laboratory. A man named Charles Yost owned a NASA, he was a NASA Hall of Fame engineer. He had a laboratory in West North Carolina. So I got exposed to all kinds of unusual instruments, Tesla coils and electrostatic generators and Geiger counters, and I would take all that stuff out into the field and experiment. And so over the years, I've now published over 20 books. Some of them are with big publishers like Simon & Schuster. I get called all the time to be a guest on different TV shows on the History Channel or Discovery Channel or Travel Channel. I mean, you name it. I have a number of businesses. I have, for example, a walking tour business in Asheville. I have a show out here in Las Vegas. I'm a very curious guy. And really, one of the things that made a big impact on me was when about 20 years ago, being a lover of odd gadgets, I decided to buy this weird little thing called a wishing machine. And I had no idea how it was supposed to work. And I realized very quickly I wasn't the only one. But it literally is a machine that is supposed to help you manifest your wishes. And so once I attained this machine, and we can talk more about that if you'd like, I figured, okay, I don't have any kids. My wife and I, we have enough expendable money to play with. I figure if I buy the thing and it doesn't work, it's just another weird thing I can put on the shelf. I can, for people who like to experiment with and can afford to experiment with stuff like this. I mean, I bought it, and much to my absolute amazement, not only did it work, but it worked repeatedly. And that's when I really got curious and I started delving into this really exotic, strange technology. And since then, it has not only improved my life, but it also has helped me understand a lot more about how the universe works and how this fabric called reality is assembled, and how that you and I and everyone watching has the ability to interact with it.
Got you. So, okay. So thing is, I teach people simple universal laws.
Hmm.
And these laws have crazy potential to just change your life.
Oh, yeah.
One of the principles that I teach people is by guiding your thoughts, you can kind of choose what you experience, in this holographic reality.
Hmm.
You're telling me that there is technology out there, the wishing machine, right?
Hmm. Right.
That can take your thoughts. Does it amplify your thoughts, or does it just maintain a certain frequency? I mean, how does radionics work? How does this wishing machine work?
So the short, honest answer is nobody really knows for sure, but I'm happy to give you my theories, and I think they're pretty good ones. For one thing, the wishing machine was actually invented well over 100 years ago by an esteemed medical physician named Dr. Albert Abrams in California. And he was actually using it for medical purposes, which is not something that I talk about because I'm not a physician and I'm not, qualified to do that. But that said, his invention was used for medical purposes, and it looks something like this. This is a very basic one I've had for years. It's a little beat up because it's been all over the world. What you find is if you get one of these things, you end up having a whole room full of them because, you can see why. And essentially what this machine would do is he would take an intention of some kind, and again, we can talk more about this in a minute, an intention, and place it on what's called an input plate. You go through a simple process of tuning the machine with these knobs that are similar to a potentiometer, and then this is your output plate. Now, before we get into how this may actually take a desire and help it manifest, because he was having success using this, but he could not scientifically explain how it works because it's got a very weird circuit inside, it was dismissed as quackery and banned for a long time. But the reason that it has survived all these years is because people who were experimenting with it were saying, there's something to this. I'm able to take what I want to happen, and it could be anything, and somehow this acts as a tool to increase the chances of that happening as long as it can happen within the laws of, natural physics. So, for example, you're not going to be able to live forever like a vampire or fly like Superman. I mean, it has to be something that it could possibly happen within the natural laws. And so this is a tool that you can use to tune your intention. And of course, I often say, if I want to travel to New York from Las Vegas, I can get out there and I can walk from Las Vegas to New York. It'll get me there eventually. It might be a harrowing journey. It might be a long one, but I can probably get there. I'd much rather be on a bicycle if I could get a bicycle, but better yet, I'd rather be in a car. You know what? Better yet, I'd rather be on an airplane. These are tools that just make the journey from here to there faster and easier for you as long as you know how to use them properly. Now, as far as my best theory as to how these things might work, for one thing, I've always been interested in what's called cymatics. And cymatics is the study of how you can take a vibration and turn it into a physical form. So, for example, you can take something like a thin metal plate and sprinkle sand or salt on top of it and play a tone underneath. And those particles will snap into all these beautiful patterns like snowflakes.
Yes.
And it shows you how this form, this vibration is an invisible thing, but at some point it connects with physical matter and shapes it. And so I feel like that when you send somehow a transmission, and it doesn't have to be on the linear Newtonian plane, maybe it's quantum entanglement we're dealing with here. But when you send this transmission into this universe, something really interesting happens. For one thing, you and I have consciousness, and we are a part of this universe. So if we have consciousness and we're a part of the universe, then that means the universe has consciousness. And therefore, your consciousness can somehow communicate with that consciousness. And so engineers like to talk about this thing called sympathetic resonance, that when you send out a frequency of any kind and you do it properly and consistently and clearly, that it will activate a corresponding frequency that is sent back to you. So that's why if you have a room that's empty except for two pianos, and one guy goes in there and bangs a chord on one piano, the other piano is going to ring that chord, even though he never goes near it and touches. And you can go on YouTube and watch people demonstrate this all day long using tuning forks, where they just strike one tuning fork and the other one rings, or guitars or whatever. So that's what's called sympathetic resonance. The idea is that when you are able to tune one of these machines properly, that somehow this is helping you to condense and magnify the thing that you want so that it takes shape in the universe and comes back into manipulating your physical world. Now, the problem that you and I have all the time is that we live in a very, very distracting world. I mean, you can think for a moment about what you want to achieve, and then it's like, oh, well, what are we going to have for dinner tonight? Got to get the kids ready for school. Now you have all kinds of interesting things to worry about when you turn on the TV, right? And so I feel like that one of the key components inside this, and there is a circuit inside this, and they're all a little different. These I like because I think these are the best ones in the world. The man who makes them, Dr. Mulder in South Carolina, he has devoted his life to this. And he says that he believes that the key is selecting the right quartz crystals that go into this circuit. And that may sound a little like, some metaphysical, mystical, new age kind of, hoo-hoo at first. But think about this. Quartz crystal, and really crystal in general, is the basis of computer technology. That's how we store things on computer chips. That's why we have Silicon Valley. Do you know that the Hitachi company a few years ago, they created a storage device using a little tiny sliver of quartz crystal, which is able to store, oh gosh, I think it was like 300 terabytes, and it could withstand up to 2,000 degrees. So it may be that when you take your consciousness, whatever that is, and you put it into this circuit and tune it, then maybe, even though you can be distracted, you put this thing away, and it kind of continues to sit there and transmit that intention on your behalf automatically. It's kind of like GPS. You don't have to look at the map constantly to know where you're going. You program it, and it sits there and works on your behalf. And even though nobody, again, can tell you this is how this thing works, it has worked for me and so many people around the world for so long that this is how I visualize it might be able to technically work. But you know what? I tell you, Justin, even if we can just say it's a placebo, maybe it's the world's greatest ever placebo. But even if that's true and it works, who cares?
Right, exactly. Because basically all we want is results.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, so from one of your seminars, you spoke of some scientists that actually put a box together, but they could actually see, certain events through time. Can you talk on that?
That is one of the more obscure stories that I've heard. I'm not surprised that you picked up on that, because that one, that's even a stretch for me to comprehend. Over the years, I have been impressed to meet a number of really esteemed scientists and engineers who have worked with some of the biggest industrial companies and universities, who have credentials like you wouldn't believe, who are into radionics and psionics. These are different sort of angles on this. And of course, wishing machine is more of a layman's term. But those people, they can't come right out and talk about this stuff at their job, because they'll be thought of as some kind of cuckoo, because they can't explain how it works. But they love sitting down and talking to people like me or Dr. Mulder. And over the years, I have been presented a variety of papers about a particular scientist who claimed that he was able to take one of these wishing machines and incorporate them with some type of other circuit that he invented, and create what was essentially called a time camera. So there was some way of opticalizing this circuit, according to him, and that upon doing so, he was able to actually not only look back and see things from the past, but also capture them to some degree photographically. And what's interesting about that is, even though that may sound completely impossible, just imagine how complex it is for us to remember something. I mean, right now we have this consciousness that allows us to remember, what we had for breakfast yesterday, or what kind of dream that I had last night. Where is that information stored? If one of these boxes resonates somehow with human consciousness, then maybe one of these boxes is able to somehow tap into the past and access it in that way. The problem is, as often is the case with these types of stories, supposedly somebody out there wanted this technology. They came to this man, they basically silenced him, they took all the technology, they took all the papers, and it's one of those things that has been concealed. Now, I can tell you that everything that I've heard about this has really, at the end of the day, been anecdotal to me. I've never seen such a device, but it gives you a good example of how extreme some people who have a good background in science and engineering think that this technology could be applied, to very, very amazing, extreme things that go beyond whether or not you want it to rain for your birthday party, or if you want to sell your car or whatever. I mean, that gets into some of the really, really weird stuff that people are trying to do with these mind machines.
Wow. So there was a scientist from the 60s, and I believe he worked for the Vatican, and he invented I think it's called the Cryo Visor, where basically he built a box very similar to that, and he was able to look at future events and past events. And I wonder if that was, similar technology.
Yeah, it should be, because, and you're teaching me something. I hadn't heard about that event, or that incident. I'm going to look that up. And, the thing that I find most fascinating about what we might be able to learn regarding this and the chain of events we experience in life is that when you talk to the most highly credentialed, intelligent cosmologists and physicists and astrophysicists out there, they all have books and documentaries where they say, look, we've worked out the math, and all past, present, and future are actually occurring simultaneously.
Right.
And we are just experiencing it little by little from a limited point of view. And on one hand, if you accept that, it sounds kind of depressing because it makes it feel like everything's locked in stone. It's like I remember studying in philosophy that battle between freedom and determinism. But maybe there's a third option here. Maybe it's not just, well, you can either have free will or you can have some fixed destiny. Maybe there are many different fixed destinies, and free will is what gives you the sort of tuner to sort of switch between those possible fixed destinies. That might be a way we can reconcile those two. And so that brings up a really interesting question. If we have a machine like this, which is somehow an extension of the human experience, then if it allows us to see into the past or into the future, are we seeing into everybody's singular, exclusive past and future, or are we seeing different options for at least the future? And does that mean you could see a future scenario and then say, okay, I don't like that, so I'm going to see if I can use my free will to change that experience? And what you and I have discovered through our work with the law of attraction is that you can change your experience just because you choose to do so. At least that's how it seems from our point of view. And I sent you a copy. I have this book on the law of attraction I wrote called Use the Force, a Jedi's Guide to the Law of Attraction, because I'm a big Star Wars nerd.
Nice.
And what I think, Justin, is that these machines are actually law of attraction machines, because we're all talking about different ways of doing the same thing. which is trying to rearrange your reality to your liking and improve your life and improve your experiences. And so I think you can do it without the use of tools. And you can, if you are especially a very disciplined person, you can learn some techniques, you can learn some meditations. You know, there's a lot of misinformation out there. And so one of the things that I do, I'm like you, I'm very result oriented. And so I've combined in this book, for example, what I think are the very strongest, most solid, pragmatic things that worked in my life. So you can do these things solely with the power of the mind. But these tools can help you a lot, especially if you're the type of person who enjoys things that have knobs and switches. And, you know, if you're like me, you're a gadget guy, it's fun to experiment with. And, you know, I can tell you many, many stories about things that I've been able to do, both big and small. But I think ultimately we're still dealing with the law of attraction principles and the mystery of how we use that and determining our future and what our future options are.
Gotcha. What have you manifested using this box, Josh?
Well, let me give you at least 3 of my favorite stories, if you don't mind, because I think they all exemplify particular levels of this.
Okay.
So when I got my very first box, I paid $300 for it, and I bought it from a man in California. And at that time, there weren't many people even making these things. And that's one of the cool things about what we're doing now, working with Dr. Mulder. We have now shipped thousands of these, and we keep track of the people who buy them and say, how are you using it? Do you need any help? We give them personal, customized like service, and we keep track of them, and we use that data to try to figure out more about like how these things might work. So it's a research project. But anyway, I paid $300, and there are people out there who sell some of these things for $3,000. I've seen them for $30,000. Okay, so $300 was a pretty reasonable price. But I got it. I realized that I don't know how this thing is going to work, and so I thought, well, I'm going to be clever, and the first thing I'm going to wish for is my $300 back. And so, which I've learned since then, that actually wishing directly for money, you can do that. But you seem to have more success if you instead wish for the thing that you want to acquire with the money. So that is to say, instead of wishing for like $5 million so that I could have the house on the cliff in Maine with the waves crashing, wish for the house. Like skip the $5 million, wish for the house, because then you're opening up the options for the universe to bring this into your life through a lot of ways that you might have never imagined. There are ways of getting things in your life other than having to acquire the money to buy them. But anyway, I wish for my $300 back. So within days, I got a call from a big resort in the area called the Grove Park Inn Resort, and they said that they had a group of dentists that had come in for an event, and they wanted somebody to stand up and talk for, 45 minutes or something about the history of the area. And of course, I'd been writing books and articles, and they were paying $300 for the gig. And I thought, well, that's interesting, isn't it? That like the timing was right when I asked for that, and it was the exact amount. And so that got my curiosity flowing. That's when I started to say, okay, I'm going to experiment more with this. Okay, so that's story number 1. Now let's fast forward years into the future after I've done all kinds of projects and seen that this works. I was sitting at my house in the mountains of Western North Carolina in February during a blizzard. There was quite a bit of snow on the ground. The power had gone out at my house. I wasn't prepared for it. I was sitting there shivering and miserable. And I said, I think I've had enough of spending these winters here where you're going to have a blizzard up in the mountains. And so I took out my machine. I got on the internet, and I just did a Google search for tropical beach or something like that. And then I found just a picture. I picked a random picture of a tropical beach that I thought just looked beautiful, printed it out, cut it out, put it on the machine, tuned the machine, put it aside. Within, I'm going to say maybe a week or something like that, I got an email from a man in Puerto Rico, and he was having some strange activity at his house and said that he had been reading my work and hearing me on radio shows, and he wanted to hire me to go to Puerto Rico and work on this research project, and he was going to pay me to do it and pay for my trip. I said, you don't have to twist my arm, buddy. I hopped on an airplane, went to Puerto Rico, where it was like summertime, and while I was down there, I met a real estate agent. She showed me this condo right there on the beach that I instantly fell in love with, and I said, you know what, I think I can work this out to have this. And so I went back up. I told my wife, Lauren, we've been together now for 23 years. I told Lauren, I said, Lauren, quit your job. We're moving to Puerto Rico. So she quit her job, and we started packing up, and I looked over at that wishing machine, and I thought, man, that thing really worked. And I got really curious because I'd saved that picture of that beach on my computer before I printed it out. I went back and I brought up that picture, and I did a search for the name of the picture again. And this almost gives me goosebumps right now. That was a picture of the Boquerón Beach in Puerto Rico, the one right next to my condo.
Wow.
I had no idea what tropical beach that was. That could have been any beach in the world. I didn't even have to know what beach it was. Somehow I put that wish in there, and it rearranged the circumstances and opportunities of my life in order to send me down to this spot, which would change my life. And that's why also, like, if you wish for a pot of gold, don't expect a leprechaun to show up and drop a pot of gold at your feet. What happens is you start rearranging circumstances and synchronicities in the universe that will open up these pathways. And if you're aware enough, you follow those chains of events and it leads you where you need to be. Third story and last story, because the first one showed you how it was sort of easing into like whether or not this stuff works. The second one was a major thing that happened that, again, changed I lived there for 5 years. The only reason I don't live there now is because of the hurricane. I mean, when Hurricane Maria hit, it's been one thing after another there, and it was hard for me when you always have the power going in and out and the internet going in and out. I couldn't have this conversation with you, perhaps. So anyway, when I was down there, and had just loved those years, I was contacted by a guy who got one of our machines, a man who lives in Canada, and he said that he likes to go out and metal detect for fun. So he said all the years he'd been doing this, he'd never found anything made of gold with a diamond in it. And so he set his machine, I want to find something made of gold with a diamond. And so then he went out, and it turns out he wasn't able to metal detect. His plans changed, but he nonetheless had to go into town. And as he was walking down the street, he looks down, and what does he see? A gold bracelet with a diamond in it. Okay, so he got his gold bracelet with a diamond either way. So I heard this story, and I thought, well, that's a cool experiment. I'm going to try that. I've never wished for something gold with a diamond in it. So I set my machine up, forgot about it. And shortly thereafter, again, it's always like, for me, it's like 5 to 7 days usually when things start kicking in. My little sister, Jessica, had never been to Puerto Rico. So she came down to stay with us and visit with us for a while. And one of my favorite places to take people, my favorite place to go was this little, it's like a little, well, it's an island. It's called Gilligan's Island. And when you go to this little island, there's nothing commercial there. There are no shops or anything. It's a deserted little island, but the water around it is just crystal, it's clear and turquoise. And I mean, it's like a big bathtub, and I love taking people there. So we went there. You have to take a little boat to get over to it. We went there on a Monday. So there was like nobody there except the three of us, my wife, Lauren, my sister, Jessica, and myself. So anyway, at one point I was out there and I was sitting on the floor of the sea, and I had the water about up to my shoulders, and my wife loves seashells. And so a lot of times I'm always trying to see if I can find her a nice shell or something. Here I am just sort of feeling around in the sand, and my wife came up and sat down next to me, and I go, "What's that?" And I pluck from the sand a men's 14-karat gold ring with 9 diamonds in it. that looks like it's brand new from the store and beautifully fits my ring finger. And my wife was sitting right there and saw me do this, and she says, "Holy!" I mean, like, she was like, "Are you serious? Did that just happen?" I said, "Yeah, that just happened."
Wow.
And that was, I mean, I've never, ever had that experience in my life. Now, you got to realize this is under the water. I could have sat down anywhere in the Caribbean Sea, you know, and it was right when I'd asked for that. And I consider that such a lucky ring today that now that I live in Las Vegas, if I'm going to go to the casino, I'll put my little lucky ring on, you know, before I hit up the slots or the tables. And I am very lucky. I must say I do quite well. So I could go on and on telling you about personal experiences. And then every single day, people email me from all over the world, every culture you can imagine, telling me about their own incredible experiences. And so that's why that I I would consider this to be the single most life-altering tool for me and my friends and my loved ones. I have been self-employed since I was 18 years old. I get to travel the world doing the thing that I love. And, you know, like I said, I have everybody in my life that I love and care about is with me. Wonderful marriage. I have freedom. I just get opportunities every single day. And I enjoy what I'm doing so much. It's just like when I heard from you, for example, I was like, oh, this is going to be so cool to get this opportunity to talk to you. And every day it's like some kind of cool, positive thing happens. And so that's why I really believe that whatever this is something that shows us that you can have a life that seems sort of like a fairy tale. And there are numerous ways of doing it. But the key here is that it's possible that we can all do it. You just have to learn a little bit and take it seriously and give it a try. And so that's why it's important for us to teach people and to lead by example. You know, it'd be easy for me to say that this works because I've heard from 50 people, but I'm telling you, it worked for me, just like what you've done has worked for you.
So I'm a student of the laws of the universe because they do work. They work every single time.
Yeah.
Not always when you want them to work, but
Yeah.
exactly when they should work, right?
Yeah, that's right.
But I manifested some really miraculous things, and it has me questioning, what is reality? What is this 3D holographic simulation that we live in? Like, Josh, what is this, Josh? What's really going on? Like, to the fact that your thoughts, the images that you hold in your mind, that you mix with emotion, somehow make their way into the physical world. What is going on here, Josh? What do you think?
Well, it seems to me that it's a two-way street. My feeling is, and of course, the best we can do as humans is try to imagine a model that we can comprehend and grasp in our little minds. It's like, I'm sure a cockroach might have some trouble understanding our conversation right now. And so there are limits on what we can understand about this glorious masterpiece. But I feel like if we are to take everything we know about philosophy and physics and metaphysics and scientific experimentation and human behavior and all this stuff, and you look at it and say, how does it scale from the tiny level to the cosmic level and vice versa? It seems a lot like we have this little thing at the seat of our brains, which I call the wormhole brain.
Okay.
Because scientists tell us out there is something called a black hole. And that when energy goes into this black hole, we don't know what happens to it. It goes somewhere else. And if you happen to be on the opposite end of that, there might be another thing similar to a black hole. And we call those wormholes that connect those two together. Now, if you crack open a human brain, you're not going to see my memories. You're not going to hear any words come out. It's just a piece of flesh. Where is all this stuff? Where is my personality? where am I in the middle of all that? It's like a caveman cracking open a television set because he wants to see the little people dancing around inside. And all he gets is a bunch of wires and capacitors and, where are the people? Well, we are actually information that is being exchanged between this place and at least one other place, two sides of a coin. And I think it has to do with how information is flowing back and forth between what is exactly like a tiny black hole or a tiny wormhole, and that's where your consciousness is connecting you to somewhere else. It might be similar to what some mystics have called the Akashic record. But the information which comes out here, it then is interacting with all of these particles that are around us. Now, if you're the type of person who says, well, I am just a passive victim and I am only subject to the external forces that are working against me, then you're forgetting that, no, it goes both ways. That you can take this information that's coming from the wormhole brain and you can change this information around you, because this information is just malleable and flexible. The particles that you have around you are just waiting to be shaped by something. It's kind of like when you have a sand castle and all the little particles are fixed into place, but you just shake it up a little bit and they all start crumbling, and now you can make them become like liquid if you shake it fast enough. You can put your hand right through. So you can rearrange these particles by shaking them up a little bit. And so it seems to me that this is a holographic reality because it's flexible. It's not fixed into place. That we are projecting from our brains, our minds, onto these materials. And if we do it consistently and we do it methodically and we know what we're doing and we take it seriously, then we can make these things reshape so that the mental mold we're creating is what the physical material eventually adheres to and falls within and shapes to. And that's why it can change. So you're either master of mind or you're mastered by mind. And the funny thing is, you don't have a choice because you're manifesting 24/7, whether you want to or not. And that's why I believe that when you call your channel YouAreCreators, I believe that's what you mean. Because right now, you're constantly sending out either noise or music, but you're sending it out, whatever it is. So if you don't want to sort of train and refine what you're sending out, you're going to send out a bunch of chaos. And that's what you're going to get back to you. You're going to feel out of control. You're going to feel weak and confused and ill and depressed. And you're going to feel lost. And you really are going to feel like you are just a victim of all these circumstances. And that what happens when you project that out is that you keep manifesting that for yourself, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But on the other hand, if you learn how to turn those vibrations, for a lack of a better word, into music, you turn the noise into music, well, suddenly now you have some harmony and it feels good and you're starting to get into your groove. And then suddenly you are shaping, you're conducting these symphonies around you. And when you do that and you find out you're the conductor, you realize that, look, stuff doesn't always happen overnight. Right. We're not talking about wishful thinking here. We're not talking about throwing a frisbee out into a storm that's blowing in all different directions and saying, well, I hope it comes back to me or whatever, or goes where I want it to go. No, we're talking about methodically doing this, using techniques that work. That's like why when you're walking through the woods, you find a path. And that path has probably been there for hundreds of years. And how did that path get worn in those woods? Probably just because that over time, so many different individuals found that way to be attractive. And so it eventually creates a permanent path. You have to do that with the weeds growing around your life. And so this reality is kind of like a big internet. For example, if you want to create a website is not actually a real thing. It's just an organization of symbols and symbolic information that you can use to communicate. So if I take, let's say I bring up a picture of a tree on the internet and I hit the printer and I print that picture out, well, now I have a physical representation of that tree. But I can take that and wad it up, tear it up, burn it. But that doesn't mean the picture of the tree is gone. I can just create a temporary, limited physical representation and destroy that. I think that's why there's life after death. That this physical form right here that you have is an ever-changing physical representation of this flow of information. And by ever-changing, I mean that's what we call aging. You know, we don't look the same as we did 10 years ago, and we're going to look a little different in 10 more years until we die, and then we transition on to something else. But for now, if you can realize that the tree, the information that's been arranged there is different than the physical world, that is perhaps a way of comparing the mind to what we often call the physical world. And so you can change the physical world to influence the way somebody thinks, or you can change the way you think to change the physical world. But if you think it's only a one-way street, well, then you're going to screw up, because if you think it's 100% you can do whatever you want, then you become a solipsistus, a megalomaniac. You know what I mean? That's when you get like crazy tyrants and stuff like that, like ancient Roman emperors. You shouldn't say like, I'm the only thing that exists in the whole universe here. But you have to see that there's a balance. And when you start tapping into that balance, oh man, that's how you can start swimming and enjoying the river instead of drowning in it.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. You know, I mean, one thing I teach people is you shouldn't have to endure life, enjoy life, enjoy this human temporary experience. And since we are spiritual beings having this human experience, why not have everything you want? Why not create whatever you want on this planet? Have fun in this dimension, you know? And that's why, you know, I kind of do what I do. Because I love that aspect. Like, you know what? We are powerful creators. We can create anything we want. So, yeah. Josh, how can my audience find one of these boxes?
Well, you know, as I said, I'm very proud that Dr. Mulder, who I work with, makes the very best boxes in the world, and they're very affordable as well. And knowing that we were going to have this conversation, and knowing your audience is a very curious, enlightened audience that wants to experiment with things, said, I'm going to set up a page just for Justin and his audience. It's called wishingmachinelove.com. Wishingmachinelove.com. If you go there, there's a lot of free educational content. You can read frequently asked questions, and you can even read the instructions for how to use one of these. People ask a lot of questions like, you know, how do I use this thing exactly? How long is it going to take? Can two people use the same machine? What's the proper way to wish for this or that? A lot of that stuff is answered already. Plus, I sent you probably a 2.5 hour documentary that I did called The Wishing Machine Workshop, which you watched and enjoyed. Well, that is posted there also for your audience to watch for free.
Wonderful.
And right now, we have taken some of our most popular machines, we put them right there, and thanks to you, for today or for a limited time, we'll see how long we can do this. Anybody who gets one of those machines, only from that page now, wishingmachinelove.com, is going to get a discount, and if they're in the United States, they'll get free shipping.
Wow.
So we hope that everybody will at least go and look at wishingmachinelove.com. It doesn't hurt. And you know what? Even if you decide not to buy one of these things, just reading about it, learning about it, I believe is going to open your mind and help you to grasp other ideas for ways that you can improve your life. And right now, we need it more than ever. We really are up against some big challenges. And I love what you said recently on one of your videos. You said, sometimes you just need to turn off the news, you know, because, and just focus on your sphere, your circle, like think about your life and your loved ones. You can't go out and necessarily change the whole world. Okay, you can spin your wheels and try to live your life for everybody else. Take it one step at a time. Think about yourself. Think about your family. And, I believe that these are tools that can help people do that in these really trying times when you got people trying to pull your energy and your attention in all different directions. So, Justin, you're doing very important work. And I mean, I'm so impressed with you and what a wonderful audience you've got. So thank you so much for doing what you're doing. And, you are creators, my friend. That says it all.
Josh, thank you so much for being a wonderful guest on my show.
It is truly my pleasure. Thank you.
We have to have you back. Have to.
Oh, absolutely. I'll be more than happy to come back anytime you'd like.
And you just went down the rabbit hole where we question the mysteries and nature of reality only on YouAreCreators.tv.